my pseudonym on social media is Morena Mogalintwing, but my actual name is Timakazi David Mukwena. And I'm a father of a 9-year-old baby girl. I'm a policeman, okay? Yeah, what else can I say about myself? I come from a family of 7. I'm a last born. I've got 3 brothers, 3 sisters. That's basically about me, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like a large family.
It is. We are quite a big family. We don't always get along, but at the end of the day, we love each other. We always there for each other, especially if one of us, is in need of any kind of support. We always there for each other. That's what I love about my family. I'm quite. We are a close-knit family. Yeah, I think, like in other family, we don't always get along because of, personal issues that we go through. And, we each are our own different people, and we've got views about the world and how, we each need to honor, whatever it is that we encounter in life. But yeah.
Well, I guess it happens. I'm also from a large family. There's 6 of us. I'm the third born. Yeah. So I know the drama that happens and everything else. Yeah. But anyway, I just need to let's focus on this and forget about the other stuff. Well, according to you, you're from the large family. I'm assuming there's a lot of love, and then there's also a lot of bickering. According to you, what does it mean to be a father?
For me, I think firstly, being a father, it's all about, forgetting yourself and understanding that there is somebody who needs you to be there for them, through everything, financially, morally, like in any other thing. And I think, for me, being a father, when I'm with my daughter, I just forget about everything and I see the world through my daughter's eyes. And, if she's being silly, of course, also, I'm going to be silly, we're going to be playful, I can't sing to save my life, but she likes singing, and also she can sing to save her own life up. We just really very silly, and we tease each other. She likes singing quite a lot. I remember there was a time, I think 2016 or 2017, where she was in hospital. She had just undergone an operation, and she was in so much pain, she was crying. And, I wasn't well at all, and I just broke down and cried. And the nurses told me that, you shouldn't cry in front of your daughter. And then I just stepped outside the room, and I thought, she didn't see anything. But 2 years later, I think sometime last year, she reminded me and said, "Oh, well, I remember that time that I was in hospital, you were actually crying. How can you cry?" So, I think overall, for me, being a father, it's about actually being a present father, a father that is actually always there for your child whenever it is that they need you.
No, that's good, man. That is good. That is so sweet. So you are very sensitive too.
I'm a Cancerian, so
God, no.
A Cancerian. I know we share a birthday. In July.
No, I don't cry, okay? Yeah. I don't cry. You're on your own then. You're on your own.
But it takes me quite a lot to cry though. So it takes me, for me to cry, I think, I must be in a space that's really difficult in order for me to cry. So I don't just cry. I'm not a cry baby, but if I feel like crying, I just let out and cry. Like I'm not afraid to cry. If I feel that I need to cry, I'll just cry.
Yeah. So while we're talking about crying, right? Most of us are actually coming from the patriarchy upbringing, right? Where a man is not supposed to cry. A man is supposed to be strong at all times, and a man is not supposed to show any weaknesses, right? And yet you are on the other side where you are diving headfirst in this parenting thing. Most of us men, let's be honest, we were not groomed to raise kids.
No.
Then here you are flying solo. Like, how are you even doing it?
Firstly, let me start with the issue of crying. I think, I too have been socialized in a way that, although nobody comes to and say, as a man, you shouldn't cry, but even if you go to a funeral, for instance, you'll only see that, it's women that are crying, in quite a safe space. And then you look at men, they don't cry, but then there is this pain inside them which they don't want to express. And I think by doing that, we bottle a lot of things inside us, and at some point it's going to explode. So for me, I think over time, I think, I'm someone that, I'm quite a curious person, in terms of if I find myself in a certain kind of a situation, I always try to investigate or to research ways of dealing with things. So and I discovered that actually it's okay to cry as a man, because it's good for your healing process. So I think the kind of stereotypes that we have in society, we've been taught that, of course, as a man you shouldn't cry, etc.
Yeah.
But I was like, F that. If I want to cry, I will cry in order for me to feel better.
Yo, I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah, and also the second part of your question in terms of how am I doing it, I must just say firsthand that, I think the mother of my child, she's doing a great job in terms of raising my daughter, because, she's the primary caregiver of our child. And
Okay.
yeah, so my daughter's gonna be 10 in October. I think thus far she has really done a great job, although we're no longer together now. I believe, I should pay her the kind of dues that she deserves. And then also, whenever I go to fetch my daughter for her to come and spend time with me, I think, I can't do it all by myself, because, my daughter, she uses a wheelchair. So I've got a sister, an older sister, and I'm now. So each time that I say, I need to go fetch my daughter, my daughter needs this, my daughter needs that, she would literally drop everything that she's doing. If, for instance, now I receive a call that my daughter is well, or I must go fetch my daughter now, and if I have to call my sister, she'll just say to me, okay, fine, what time are we going? What time are we leaving? Should I get ready? Where do I find you? Where do we meet? So she doesn't ask me any questions. So I think, I can't do it all by myself. Although, out there on social media, it seems like I'm doing it without breaking a sweat. That's not actually, the full picture, because I really am heavily reliant on my family, my nieces, my nephews, because each time I go to fetch my daughter, they play with her and they push her on a wheelchair. Sometimes we just drive to go to town for ice cream, and, they all come with. So, yeah, I think coming from a big family, it comes in handy, in a sense that also, I think my family, they've never treated my daughter as a disabled child. For them, it's like she's one of our own and she's part of the family, and they've never in any way made her feel like she's a disabled child, and they've never made me feel that I'm a disabled child.
Yeah. No, well, it's a good thing. It's a good thing that you have support. I think that helps a lot. Because I can imagine like how frustrating must have been if you actually really had to fly like solo. But I mean, at the end of the day, you are still a single parent, right?
I am, yes.
Which is it's still something that it's a most ignored demographic, single black fathers, and I mean, there's so much negativity. I mean, in our community, and the whole stereotype that our fathers are never around. If they are always absent, and those that are there, they are never fully involved. Yet here you are, you're defying the stereotypes. You're defying all the odds, and you are there, hands on, day in, day out. I mean, that is something to be applaudable.
Thank you.
I mean, there's very few fathers out there probably who will do it. I mean, even the stats, they're actually saying that, 2/3 of South African children grow in homes without fathers,
That's
which is really sad. Which is really sad. But what I also want to understand, I mean, I don't know how to put this in a very, because I know you're very sensitive. So I don't understand.
Just say it the way it is. Straight talk never breaks any friendship.
Yeah, but I'm trying to understand. when you were growing up, was your father present?
Yeah, no, when I was growing up, my father, he was never there. So basically, my father and my mom, they separated when I was 3 years old. They never divorced. Even the time that he died, they were never divorced. So basically, my mom was married before. She had 4 children. It was 2 daughters and 2 sons. Then she divorced. Then a couple of years later, I think about 10 years later, then she met my father in the mid-70s. And then she got married again. And then there was my sister who was conceived and born in 1980. And then my brother that I come after was born in 1983. And in 1985, I was born. So, and I don't have any memory of my father. The only thing that I remember him doing for me, it was, I think, 1992. I was in standard 1. I think it's grade 3 now. He came to pay for my school fees, and he didn't even ask to speak to me. He just simply came to my class, spoke to my teacher, paid my school fees, and left. And at that point in time, I think the school fees was just, I think, R3.50 or R2.50. I don't remember. And I remember way much later on in life, I went back to my mom. I said, I remember my father coming to my primary school, which was a mud school, paying my school fees. He didn't even speak to me. He didn't say anything. He just came into my class, paid my school fees, and left. Then my mother said to me, oh, well, actually, he didn't do that out of the goodness of his own heart. She had actually taken him to the head man in the village. And she reported to me that, this man doesn't want to take care of his children, doesn't want to pay for their school fees, and things like that. And the headman actually instructed him to actually go pay our school fees. So that was something that he was forced to do. And also, one last thing that I remember him doing for me, I had a school trip, I think it was in 1995. I was in standard 4. I went to the place where he stayed, which was like 8 km away from our family home. He then gave me R5 to pay for my school trip. I think we were going to town.
I'm sorry.
We were going to town. So
well, it was big. It was big at that time. It was a lot, right? It's like the thought of R5. I'm like, whoa. Okay.
So my father was largely, an absent figure in my life. So I don't have any good memory of him or me playing with him or anything like that. And I remember the time that he died in 1997. He died like a pauper. We only find out on the Friday that actually your father has been buried the following day. That time, I think it was 8 o'clock on a Friday night. Quickly, we had to get ready to go to his funeral. Our clothes were dirty. We had to wash our clothes, our shoes, and things like that. Wake up very early in the morning and go to his funeral. So,
Is that the reason? Sorry.
He was largely an absent figure, and I think as I grew, I actually made a vow to myself that I don't want to be the kind of a father that, my father was. Although I'm no longer together with the mother of my child, I think because I know firsthand to have experienced my mother trying to provide for us, I thought I don't want, my daughter to actually experience what I experienced, especially because she's living with a disability.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask next. Is that a reason why you are so involved in your daughter's life? Is because you were actually robbed of that love, fatherly love. Now, you don't want your daughter to go through the same thing again.
I don't know. I think, I wouldn't really say it's my biggest motivating factor. I think my natural love for my daughter, it just compels me to act in a way that's loving. I wouldn't really say it's because, my father was that kind of a father, but I think at the back of my mind, I despise the kind of a father that my father was because he was just absent, he didn't care, and I don't think that's how things should be like. And but I think overall, I think me being there in my daughter's life, I think, it's largely motivated by my love for my daughter, really.
Yeah. So, okay, you're raising a kid with special needs. Right. And I'm trying to think, there is no school, right, that prepares one for this. Yeah. And I'm sure the journey for you has been very frustrating and also like a learning curve. Like, do you mind to take us through like briefly how that has been for you?
Yeah, firstly, I remember when my daughter was diagnosed with hydrocephalus. It was in 2011. She was just 3 months old. So the kind of person that I am, I'm an initial denialist. I'll probably go like, okay, it's not something big. It's gonna be fine and stuff like that. But then as time went by, I actually started to see the situation for what it was and the enormity of the situation. And I think then immediately as soon as I came to terms with my daughter's condition, I had some sort of a stress which developed into depression. And then I went to go see my GP and she prescribed some medication for me to manage the stress. And then way much later on that year in 2011, then my daughter needed to undergo an operation. So I think that's when things really started to go really bad for me, like mentally, in a sense that then my depression took its toll on me. Then my GP referred me to a counselor. I went, to a psychologist for counseling, and also, with all the challenges pertaining to my daughter, physical challenges that she has. Over the years, I found myself diagnosed with major depression in 2016. I was hospitalized for a couple of days in Pretoria. I have a psychiatrist now that takes care of me. And so it hasn't been an easy journey. I think also because because of the medical assistive devices that my daughter needs, I think for now today she has undergone a total of 3 operations. One for what they call VP shunt. Basically, what that means is that they put a pipe on the brain into the stomach for it to actually drain the water from the head into the stomach. Yeah, so that on its own, when she underwent that operation in 2011, it really scared me because I was afraid of losing my daughter. I can't imagine my life without my daughter. So I think, and then, it hasn't been easy. It's been quite challenging, but at the same time, I have to be strong for my daughter because she needs me to be there. And I remember, I think sometime in 2016, things were so hard, especially financially, from late 2016. My finances, they really took a nosedive, and I had to actually make a decision to actually say that, okay, I'm going to neglect some of my, financial responsibilities in terms of the credits that I had with, shops, loans, and things like that. And I really channeled all my financial resources into my daughter's wellness. And also, I think I gotten into trouble with my bank. I remember there was a time that FNB actually.
Okay. All right. Okay. No, it's fine. I understand, and I don't mean to cut you short, but okay. Let's not mention names.
Okay.
For future references, we don't want to get into trouble. But okay, I have to applaud you on this one. A lot of people don't admit, right? A lot of people don't admit when they actually have a lot on their plate. Like right now, you're saying that you actually went through depression because of the situation and the strain that you were dealing with, or the distress that you were dealing with, especially when it comes to your daughter and stuff. I mean, a lot of people, they don't want to admit that they're actually going through a lot. So I have to applaud you there for taking the initiative, and getting help. Because I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not fully functioning, you can't even be there for your daughter emotionally or physically. Yeah. So I mean,
I think it goes back, I think, to what you said earlier, that as men we're taught not to cry, etc. I think the thing about mental health, you can't physically feel that kind of a pain. It's an emotional thing. I think because of what it is, people cannot see, where you're feeling the pain, or you cannot actually say, I've got a cough, I need to take some sort of medication to treat the cough.
Yeah.
I think the issue of mental health, we don't pay as much attention to it as we do with other kind of illnesses, because mental health, like depression, stress, it is an illness at the end of the day, and you need to treat it accordingly. So in life, I think for me, because of my daughter's situation, she's a disabled child, and I've realized that there are certain things in life that I cannot do anything about. I mean, I would love for my daughter to work, but there is nothing that I can do for her to be able to work. So if I have challenges, such as a mental health challenge, so the first thing that comes to my mind is, what is it that I need to do for the situation to be better? So if I can get help in any form of a way, so I will take the help. For instance, if I've got major depression, like I'm battling it now, for me it's an issue of, okay, what is it that I need to do, to make my situation better? So I always seek help where I feel that I need to seek help, and admitting that things are not going well and you need help is not a sign of weakness or anything like that. It shows that there's strength inside
at
you.
all.
Yeah, so you can actually admit that things, well, I need help, and you actually go for the kind of help that you need. So I think we should encourage more men to go out and seek help, because depression is a silent killer. And I think there was a time that I read an article on News 24. It was written by Professor Lizette Rabin. It was after Professor Bongani Mayosi of UCT, after he died of suicide, which is a new terminology that we need to speak of, because people say someone committed suicide. If you say someone commits suicide, it shows a rational act of saying, I'm going to commit to this thing. So it's like, if you enter into a relationship, you commit